So I'm welcoming my guest, Michael Roschek-Hauptmann.
Hello.
Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Hello. Hi. How are you?
Thank you, thank you. All good. We're just waiting for a few other participants to join, and we'll start our journey today about EUDR implementation. In the meantime, I'll just put on the screen the presentation. Yeah. So we will begin with a presentation of the overview, how we at Deeplai are proposing to solve the implementation challenges regarding UDR. And we will be happy to receive your questions. So as you can see, there is a Q&A tab. Feel free to ask a question, and in the discussion part after the presentation, we shall be happy to answer all questions. We received some questions up front, so many thanks for those who took their time. Yes, we also here have prepared, based on our experience and multiple webinars. Basically, the last time we're doing every week, at least one. So getting a lot of attendees and question marks, because at the end of the day, we see the still being just 9 months close to the enforcement of EUDR. There are a number of clients who want to understand where is their place in the supply chain, what is their role, and how they can comply with the EUDR obligations. So let's begin the presentation. I'll just try to keep on the highlights and encourage you to get through the Q&A once again. So good morning, and let's begin. So to give a little bit of insights about our company, the Deeplai, who we are and where we're placed on the market. So we are a technology partner with PEFC for a year, which brings a lot of good collaboration, and we're helping a number of clients to understand the EUDR requirements. Equally important, from the beginning of this year, from January, we're also a member of ATIBT, so the Tropical Timber Organization. Number of issues which will be also covered in the presentation. We know how it is important to have all the due diligence process in place for imports from high risk environments. We also have implemented in our platform, we call it the first mile, basically where we're also having a built-in module related to the authentication, which is very important, that we're sourcing the data. So we have launched our first version of the Timber ID platform for EUDR compliance in May 2024. And since then, we're enhancing it based on the feedbacks we're receiving from our clients, and we're working with renowned forestry professionals, as Michael, whom I invited for this webinar, and many others, leading experts in the industry, to help us to get all the details, because as we know, always in any process, the importance is in details, and we need to understand them. Here, at this moment, it's very important. We're trying to always emphasize the short version of the definition, I would say, regarding EUDR. Yeah. So we're trying to explain it in a way that it is depending on the role in the supply chain, where the EUDR obliges the companies to conduct the due diligence process to prove the compliance. This requires the collection of reliable and verifiable information on supply chains, risk assessment, and risk mitigation measures, including particular collection, as we call it, the first mile timber data at the geolocation of sourcing. So here we need to understand that the bulk of the EUDR obligations are related to the due diligence process. The issue of the due diligence statement, it is a technicality of a process which we're automating in our platform. So I think the key element for everyone who is thinking, how to meet the obligations under EUDR is to have the tool and the digitalization approach of the managing of a due diligence process. And obviously, being a part of a supply chain, you need to do it in collaboration with other members of the supply chain, the stakeholders, and our Timber ID platform is giving you a lot of automation advantage here. Importantly to be said, our approach is specific for timber and rubber only. So we're not doing other commodities under EUDR, which you can observe on the market, that basically the companies which are dealing with EUDR are covering all commodities. We believe that timber is so specific and rubber that you need to understand it in depth, and that's why we're just focusing on these two commodities. So the due diligence process elements, and what is very important is that we are understanding that the stakeholders want to keep the privacy and security of their data. They need to provide the right risk assessment and mitigation measures. So we're automating these processes. And obviously, in any due diligence, you need to provide audits. So if we can automate as well the audit information we can gather in, that's a very, very important. And at the end, it's all based on the obligation and our liability at every stage of the supply chain as operators to provide the provenance evidence of the geolocation. Yeah. So having all this in mind, once again, the due diligence process documentation, it's very, very important, and we need to have this in mind. We're very specific here in our approach, how we're handling and understanding the requirements of the supply chain. So our platform approach and the architecture of it is based on a decentralized level. We understand, once again, everybody needs to keep his data privacy, security, needs and should share what he has to do. It's very important that we also have the evidence that we are understanding who shared what and when. And we also can provide within the platform the authentication element, where we can get the proof of the sourcing of the timber in a way of a digital delivery note or further physical traceabilities. Because traceability is the key element of a due diligence process. If we can't trace within a supply chain, we can get any proof of the source. What is also important here is that within the Timber ID platforms, if the clients are using it in a collaboration mode, they're benefiting with a huge efficiency on workload. Basically, 80% of the work can be done automatically, which is very, very key in the way we're understanding our obligations. Yeah. So as I said, auditing is key. So once we're in a supply chain, we need to audit our suppliers and sub-suppliers till the source, but we also will get audited. Yeah. And we also need to be prepared for the audits, which the specification of the audits, the demands will come from the top of the supply chain. Yeah. And we need to comply with it. Yeah. It's very important to be said here that under EUDR, we got different levels of operators. We also have a lot of SMEs. Yeah. So the technicality of creating a DDS is one thing, and let's say submitting the received one as a reference, the DDS. So that's perfectly according to the EUDR obligations. But still, we need to expect that the audit will approach us, and we also need to audit at least few transactions to be sure that the declarations of our suppliers that they're providing the due diligence process accordingly are with the evidence. I mentioned that we have a built-in authentication module in our platform, and we have basically 3 levels how we understand, and we're using AI within our technology to support and deliver this objective. At first level, we are providing a digital delivery node. Yeah, it's supported by a photo documentation of a load, truckload, container load, where we simply are comparing the imagery we're receiving at the point of dispatch and at the point of reception. And if we're thinking about truckloads, we can add to that as well a GPS tracking of the movement of the vehicle. So this is the first level of proof that we know that this timber has been sourced at this location, and it has been moved to other location. Yeah, this we call it in the first mile, because the first mile collection of data is the most critical. There we can easily pass it to the next level of the supply chain. In a high risk environments, we are here proposing the physical traceability option of a single log. We have our own proprietary code marking technology, the decode, and the decode is having the exact geolocation and timestamp information encrypted, and we can easily then provide the traceability until we will change the form of the log, basically on a sawmill where we produce board or we produce the veneer, and we can then easily pass the set of the provenance the data to the next level of the product. One of the obligations under UDR is a deforestation or report. In our platform, it is built in a feature. So under UDR, annually you need to provide a satellite imagery deforestation or report. So you're providing it depending on the place you are in the supply chain, or you are providing it by yourself. So very easily, one click, and you will get in a full automation our report with the reference dates to 2020 as required, or you will receive the report from your supplier. Yeah, but this is one of the obligations which are showing really. The report is showing that this plot is not under deforestation or degradation. Now we need to make sure by applying the other processes that the delivery was really coming from that geolocation. As I mentioned in the beginning, we are enhancing our platform to automate as much as we can in order to make it very simple, safe, and easy for our clients to implement. One of the ways we're doing it, we're have a predefined and adjustable risk assessment and mitigation templates, and you can simply qualify them on a country level, region level, supply chain level. The key element that we have in them, the full understanding, what is the scope of information we need to gather and assess and take actions related to the plot, the supplier, and delivery. It's very important here to understand that in an organized way, we can have a very fast and rapid overview of what's happening in a structured way. You know, in practice, we see that clients are receiving, 20, 30, 50 megabytes of documentation. Yeah. But what to do with it? Yeah. How to handle it? How to understand it? Yeah. That therefore, this approach allows you to have it in an organized way, a predefined structure, and easily understand what are the requirements and how we are gathering the right information. It is allowing you to reduce dramatically the cost of the due diligence processes, and more importantly, having it under control. The next level of automation is linked with the integrations, and here we come to the level of the technicality, as we call it, where we need to submit our DDS. What we're offering our clients is to integrate Timber ID platform with the ERP system. We do it in a predefined information we need to gather on the input in the ERP system and on the output. At the end, a client is continuing to work on a daily standard way using his ERP system. And once a transaction is being issued, a delivery note is being processed in the ERP system, automatically it is passed to our Timber ID. We're managing with the full integration with the traces system, the placement of the required information set, receiving a DDS number, and sending it back to the ERP system, placing it in an appropriate defined place, and keeping all the documentation in a file for the evidence when required. So very, very important that basically at this level of automation, once you're managing your due diligence process in an appropriate way, and you don't need to do it on a daily basis. Yeah, basically you need to put all the actions in place and provide it once upon a time whenever you will have a need in the due diligence process. Here, the daily work is fully automated. and you're just focusing on your daily, work. One of the additional features which we're adding to our platform is the verification of certifications. Yeah. So for today, a PFC certificate submitted as a risk mitigation measure from the supplier it is automatically verified with the PFC the database, and if there would be any discrepancy, the information is passed. We're hoping to do it for FSC and for any other certification. The companies will allow us to get the access to the database of these certifications, and that is a big help for the clients also in the process of the automation of our workflow. When we're coming to, I think one of the key questions is affordability and business efficiency. So we're having a very specific business approach where we're trying to keep the cost effectiveness at the client level. Here you see two, let's say, just examples where we are offering our platform on an annual license fee based obviously on the size of the client. So equally good for SMEs. Larger companies will pay more. All depends on the revenues they are achieving, which are proportionally expanded in the fees. Our operational costs are related to the client use. So we have examples of clients, smaller clients having 50 invoices per month. So their fees are lower, really, because the number of documentation on a daily basis they will be processing the platform is low. We have other clients which have 3 million items in their ERP system and hundreds of invoices. Obviously, their operational costs will be higher. It is very transparent. Everything you can observe on your Timber ID instance. Every client has access to have an overview and reporting of the operational costs. And last not least, very important to be said, the implementation of our platform is just a few hours. We're supporting it with a lot of documentation, PDF documentation, video documentation, which is helping the clients to understand how we are approaching it in a very, very easy and simple way to implement. Any consultancy services and case by case, there are such requirements from our clients are under a one-to-one discussions and business arrangements, and they're charged separately. So to make a short summary of what I wanted to share with you, Timber ID is the one comprehensive and efficient UDR solution on the market. I believe the complete one with all the elements which are needed, with a lot of automation and simplifications, especially within the supply chain where their Timber ID our users are working in a mutual collaboration mode. So for us, it's really important to give anyone on the market a system which is affordable and which is enabling him to comply with the EUDR obligations in the simplest, most cost-effective and efficient way. So basically, digitalization by operational simplicity, that's our goal. So many thanks for giving me the time to give the highlights of the platform. And now I would like to just request Mikhail. Let's begin, the discussion with a general understanding of the EUDR, of the obligations within the EU, and with respect also to the companies which are exporting to EU, or the importers which are dealing with them, how they should really understand and make it simple to think to get compliant with the EUDR.
Well, thank you, Slopan, for inviting me again for this webinar. Hello, everybody. We said that we want to make it very straightforward because everybody is very much already into the EUDR, but we said we still need to line up a bit what are the real obligations which you have as an operator or a trader within the European Union related to EUDR. And this is threefold, right? So the first topic is your product needs to be deforestation free or free of forest degradation. It needs to be legally harvested. And thirdly, it needs to be covered with a due diligence statement, right? So these are the three requirements which you need to have in order to be EUDR compliant. And the rest of EUDR, the whole system, is built around these three criteria. Unlike the EU TR, which is currently in place, the timber regulation, the EUDR is now not just covering the first placement on the market, but general, the placement of the market, the making availability, and the export of a certain commodity or product, as sort of, let's say, the case when EUDR applies, basically. The way how a company needs to do this is a product-based due diligence process. So it's not about the due diligence process as we know it from other compliance processes. It's really product-based. That means the core of the process is to collect information and to assess information related to the product you're putting on the market. And a lack in doing it properly comes with really significant fines, right? So this is a big difference also to the current system which is in place. Is there now a difference between companies which are acting within the European Union and companies which are acting outside the European Union? Then I would say there is, of course, a significant difference. But this difference is basically a technical one. Companies within the European Union need to comply with the EUDR as a legal obligation. Companies outside European Union, for them, it's more rather a question of market access, right? So if you don't want to comply with EUDR and you're based outside Europe, you simply will not get market access for your products or from derived products. So there will be a legitimate interest for any company to obey the due diligence requirements for EUDR if the company wants to produce a product which can be marketed at the European market, the single market, at a later stage.
Yeah, okay, good. I just wanted to add what Michael said from the experience of our clients. Yeah. So if you're an importer, you need to have the due diligence process agreed with your supplier, with any country. So obviously, we're talking about a supply of final wooden products. We're talking supply of boards or veneer or any other plywood or any other items. Yeah. So as an importer, you need to make sure that the due diligence process is run accordingly by your supplier, and you're able to provide the audit, and you know exactly what documentation needs to be gathered in that the region because every country is specific. The list of required documentation is specific. And here it's very important that we can redefine it and we can know what really we're looking for and what our supplier needs to comply with. Yeah. So this is very critical. It's the process is not only to be handled within EU, which we also had a number of discussions with Michael here, with other clients, other opportunities. Within EU, it should be much easier. We're at the low list environment, yeah, and we know that the processes should be in place, but to manage those processes, they are much easier when we're talking about any import to EU. Then obviously we're talking about high-risk countries, and we really need to make sure that the processes are under our control. Yeah? And here, you know, this is the question, because most of the clients, and to move on, you know, Michael, you know, I mean, when I think about my company, how I should do it, yeah, that are the questions we're receiving multiple, I mean times, and obviously, you know, every case is specific. While we're in the supply chain, and how you should understand your objectives, yeah, how you would or what you would recommend to a company asking a question. Okay, what shall I do? Yeah, to get compliant. Yeah.
So this is an important question, Swapan. In the end, let's say the obligations for EUDR are quite diverse depending on which sort of activity you perform, right? So they depend on the activity and of the size of the company. So generally speaking, we can say that small and medium-sized enterprises are, let's say, coming with limited obligations related to perform due diligence if they are already in an existing supply chain for which due diligence has been already done. But if the activity is really, for instance, the first placement of the market, in the European market, there is no distinguishment again on the company size. So even, let's say, a very, very small company, when it's, let's say, purchasing wood on stamp, for instance, within Europe, or when it's importing material, right, then it's fully under the scope of the full obligations of the due diligence obligations from the UDR. That means basically, and then of course what also comes on top is that we are not speaking just about, let's say, producers. We're also speaking about traders, right? So like big traders in the European Union also are, let's say, subject to the full obligations, to the full set of due diligence requirements from EUDR. That means practically for each business, you always need to have in mind in which role you are currently. So this, what I recommend here is also always, when you deal with EUDR, first look, let's say, how are you concerned before you start any implementation process? Because probably it's very easy for you. Right? If you're small, let's say a small sawmill, for instance, right, which is just sourcing locally, and you're not purchasing on stamp, you just receive material from like the neighboring forest management units, you will receive a due diligence statement, and then you will pass on a due diligence statement. If this is in a low-risk environment, then you probably are done already. Still, it would be good to collect all this information and to have, let's say, evidence of it, right? Whereas when you have a very volatile business where you, let's say, source from different countries, where you, let's say, change between market situations, that you purchase on stamp, that you purchase roadside, that you purchase from imports, then of course it's recommended to be fully prepared for the full implementation of the due diligence measures which you need to put.
Yeah, indeed, and here to add what you're saying, Mikhail, from the experience with our clients is, on one side, the understanding, you know, where I'm in the supply chain. Okay, I am a SME, and you know, basically, I can create my due diligence statement based on the received DDS, just, you know, attach it, and, you know, and I'm basically done as a technicality, yeah. But still, now you need to understand where you are really in the supply chain, because if your buyer is a large company, they have different obligations, so they will audit you, yeah, and you need to be prepared for this audit. That's why we are really recommending everyone first just scan your supply chain, yeah, understand how it is configured, who are the stakeholders, what can you expect, because basically the liability under EUDR is lying on every operator, yeah, and every operator needs to get the proof and the evidence that the material is sourced in a deforested area legally, and we have the evidence in the supply chain, right? So this is important in the let's say overall due diligence process within a supply chain, yeah. And that's why we are recommending, if you can automate this process in a maximum possible way, you're basically getting, compliant and working as usual. So I agree with you that what you said, it doesn't, in real life, it is not so the complex if you really know what you need to do, depending on where you are. Yeah? So now, when we are here again, understanding the supply chains and the levels of the companies which are involved, yeah. We need to also once again give a little bit more insights on the auditing element, because the due diligence process is relevant once you can really audit that the information you're gathering is accurate, right?
Yes, so let's probably start again with the due diligence requirement, because I think in many cases it's hard to understand what this really means, and it's like it's an effort, but it's not as complicated as it might sound. In the end, a due diligence process always starts with information gathering. Based on this information, you are assessing the risk which you might have in your supply chain, and based on this risk assessment, you are mitigating your risk. What does risk mitigation mean? That means you collect probably additional information, you verify the information, you, let's say, ensure that what the information which you receive is correct and that you can trust it. This is most important, right? And of course, in order to be able to trust information, once in a while you might need to audit it, right? In the whole EUDR process, it's important to mention that the Commission will come up, and EUDR foresees this, that the European Commission will come up with a so-called benchmarking, country benchmarking, where it will define risks for certain countries, right? The Commission will define deforestation risks for certain countries, and countries which will have a low deforestation risk, there's hardly any additional risk mitigation measure necessary. Still, as I'm going back to what I said at the beginning, we are not just, let's say, obliged to bring in deforestation-free material, but it also needs to come with the full set of legal requirements. And of course, you might have situation when you have, let's say, sort of a low deforestation risk, but you still have a high legality risk, right? So there are situations, there are countries in which such a situation is possible. And then, of course, you have to run the whole process. So you cannot just rely on this one risk assessment. However, the risk assessment, I think there's a lot of information available. The certification systems are offering, some consultancy are offering a lot of free information also for you in order to assess risk situations. And based on this, and based on the knowledge of the supply chain, you can, let's say, then collect this additional information. And in the end, this is also then what you can audit. And the question is like, again, is there a difference between inside Europe and outside Europe? Practically, methodologically, not, right? So the process will always be the same. It's just that outside Europe, you will not have a sort of a due diligence statement on which you can relate. So you will always need to have, let's say, a very clear structure in how to collect this information. And of course, then systems such as the timber ID system is one of the possibilities on how you can structure this information, how you can collect it.
Okay, Michael, many thanks for that explanation. I think, it gives a lot of insights to think over, and just to add on it, again a real case. Yeah, so you can be in a low risk country within EU, right? And you can source the timber, as you mentioned, from a neighboring, forestry. And that's fine. But in case the suppliers are coming, let's say, from a protected area as Natura 2000, then you need to be more cautious in the processes. Yeah. So always it is a trade-off to understand very precisely from where are you sorting the material. It's not just a general approach. I'm in a low risk the country defined by the EU, and that's it. No, it's always very specific to understand who is your supplier when you're sourcing the material, right?
It's always a risk-based approach, Lapan. This due diligence process is always depend also on the risk appetite of certain companies, right? If a company says, okay, I'm fine with it, it's fair enough, but let's say EUDR requires you then also to take the liability. So in case something happens, you will be, let's say, subject to really, really severe fines. And if then your risk assessment and your risk mitigation model which you apply comes with flaws or is inaccurate, this is, of course, obviously something which will also raise the authorities' attention. And then you have to argue. And this is, let's say, where it's recommended to have a bit more of foresight and a bit more of, let's say, caution in this regard, and rather collect a bit more of due diligence information than too few.
Yes, and to just put on the top, not everybody is understanding this, that within EU, we can expect an audit from a competent authority from our own country level, but also from any other member country competent authority where the material has ended up in a final product. Yeah, so yes. We just prepared for that. Yeah,
important point. Yeah, and very good point also. Like any product, there is of course a competent authority for the member state scale, which we primarily, let's say, check you, but in the end, your customers and thereby also your customer supply chain and thereby also you are subject, of course, to checks by the authorities as well. And we know from the experience from the past from EUTR implementation that there's a very heterogeneous implementation throughout, and practical implementation by the authorities throughout the whole European Union. So there are some authorities which are more strict than others. But in the end, so you do not have to be afraid of anything. If this is properly documented, if you have all your things together, then nothing will happen in this regard.
Okay, good. Many thanks. I'm encouraging the participants to ask questions since we're leading to the end of our meeting. So we're still two points here to cover. So we discussed, or I was trying to emphasize, the traceability element in the due diligence process. If you could, Michael, just give your thoughts about, the traceability, the physical traceability element, how a company should understand this level of obligation and when it should be applied. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we need to understand that the whole concept of the EUDR is based on traceability, right? So the due diligence is a product-based due diligence, and the concept is based on traceability back to the harvesting site. It's clear because the deforestation is happening not somewhere in the supply chain, but the deforestation is happening on the ground, right? So it's practical. Always you need to be able to follow back to the origin. And this is also a concept which is not very new because, let's say, especially in the forestry and in the certification, in the field of certification, the concept of controlled sources or controlled wood, like material which is not coming with a certified chain of custody, but is, let's say, brought into a certified chain of custody, always already had to be controlled back to the origin, to the clear origin, right? So this traceability concept is not new. Now, if you, let's say, look at it from a risk-based perspective again, you can decide, do I trust the information again, which I receive from my supplier, but then I'm building this traceability on, let's say, paper-based delivery notes or whatever. In high-risk situations, this will definitely not be enough, right? So because in a high-risk situation, and this is also explicitly mentioned in EUDR, this risk of mixing with, let's say, materials which are not compliant, which are not mentioned, this needs to be addressed. And you can address this exclusively by having a robust physical traceability system. This can be, for instance, like a clear, something like a digital delivery note where you have, let's say, a documentation of the loading point, a documentation of the reception of the material linked with GPS coordinates, so a very simple one, or it can go up for, let's say, more valuable species of wood for, let's say, tropical timber specifically, to have really marking systems such as, let's say, tags, or like also what you are offering, Swap, on the authentication module, right? So this is needed in order to be able to prove that the documentation which you collect is really related to the product which you have in front of you. If you're not able to prove this, if this is not linked together, it's for nothing. We need to say this very clearly. It's one of the most underrated topics, to my mind, in the whole debate on EUDR implementation. And you see that this concept is implemented in high-risk countries already. We know this specifically from Romania, for instance, within the European Union. So Romania also had a big problems with legality and with environmental risks in forest supply chains, right? And they addressed it especially with this topic of having physical traceability. So this is a tool which is already broadly implemented and which need to be understood that without physical traceability in a high-risk environment, you are hardly able to prove that your material is compliant. Therefore, I think it's a very, very important topic.
Many thanks for that. And we're just coming to the end of our discussion. I have a question to you, which basically is also based on our experience and is more as a statement. What would you recommend to the companies who are still thinking or hesitating to begin getting compliant with EUDR? We see that a lot of companies are in a standby mode. And some of them are expecting that the Commission will come with a question and answers, which will clarify something more. I don't know if you know something, we have some insights, or you can share on this topic. And on the other hand, we see that there is a low level of knowledge, of understanding what are the obligations, and that it needs time, in order to begin with the due diligence process, which in a very high level of SMEs is not existing is today, or at a very, very low number of them are providing this process, So just to make it long story, short, what do you think will be coming the Commission with, and what's the recommendation to the companies who are under the EUDR and are still, let's say, hesitating or in a standby, mode? What would be your message to those guys?
Yeah, we have to be very clear on this. Like, even if there are now discussions on, let's say, this so-called omnibus regulation, which is aiming for a simplification of some of the sustainability legislation, which has recently been put in place, such as the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, the taxonomy, or also the European supply chain legislation, the CSDDD, as it is called. There are no indications that the EUDR will also be part of an omnibus, right? Currently, I have to say. And this is understandable, because the EUDR was re-voted by the end of last year, and there was just agreed to have a delay of another year, so that it doesn't that it will come in place just by the end of 2025. Practically, the Commission also promised that they will come out with practical implementation solutions. One of these implementation solutions will be that there will be a clarification on how to handle existing due diligence statements, so to clarify what are the obligations of companies which are, let's say, operating basically with material for which due diligence has been already performed. There will be clarification of this. This is also what the regulation foresees. So you can build your, you can basically refer to existing due diligence statements within the European Union. I'm speaking just for situations within the European Union. Situations outside the European Union will not be covered by any sort of simplification in this relation. So the burden here is for sure higher, I would say, to collect all this data. But within the European Union, you still you can relate to existing due diligence systems. And still, what you need to be clear is that the liability remains with you, even if you're, let's say, referring to existing due diligence statement from your supplier. If there is a non-compliance in this batch of material which was supplied to you, you still have a problem. So you can decide, you just take the due diligence statement, or you run at least a basic, let's say, due diligence process, even for such a material, which is, of course, recommended in the end, in order to be on the secure side, specifically in standard or high risk environments. But for the rest, I can say there is no indication currently that the Commission plans to open up EUDR again. So it's highly recommended to start implementation.
Thank you, Mikhail. We got a question. Thank you for that. If deforestation issues is happening on the plot land of harvesting, what about the legality requirements? Is the commodity compliant with the requirements of sourcing in according with the legislation of origin, relevant only to the concession, or also to the other stakeholders, sawmills, exporters? If you can share your
So on the legality requirements, this is an important question because I think it's really also addressing this topic. So the EUDR is here bringing a sort of a different explanation on the legality as it was with EUTR. And it's correct that, let's say, it's focusing on the origin and basically of the country of production. It means the country in which let's say the wood was produced, let's say originally, in which the forest was standing. So you can assume that probably some of the obligations are not, let's say, linked directly to non-compliances to other sort of, let's say, legal entities. But I would, honestly speaking, I would take this approach not too narrow, because you still have certification systems, for instance, and for the certification systems, if you are in a chain of custody, there is basically no such differentiation. And probably, is other supply chain legislation, which then is also relevant for you, which is about, let's say, human rights topics, for instance, which will also touch upon this. So to have here an exclusive EUDR-related approach, I think is, when we discuss EUDR, is valid, but it's not recommended to take it exclusively. I don't know whether this answers the question specifically, but I think it's a good point. It's really touching on the base, but no recommendation just to look also legality-wise just on the plot level, but always have in mind your whole supply chain.
Yeah, many thanks, Michael. I'll just add on that, because when I read in the question, that it is related to a concession. So we're talking about, I think, African countries. We know that the concessions are large there. Yeah. So any satellite deforestation analysis report of 100,000 hectares will be by default deforested. Yeah. So depending on the country, where there are different regulations on the harvesting. Yeah. As we know, some countries, you have quotas per 1 hectare to be harvested in a selective way, etc., etc. So I think it is good, and we're inviting you here to register on our platform on the supply chain consultancy and get the understanding on the specific case, and then we'll be able to give you recommendations here, what we believe is the best way to approach it. Yeah? But for sure, legality is linked with the chain of custody, as Michael mentioned, and also we discussed some time ago about the traceability element as a part of the EUDR. So having this all in mind, is always at the end of the day, case by case, to understand the specifics and to address these specifics. Yeah, because as a general, comment. Yes, we always can share our thoughts, but I am really recommending you to get into specifics and try to get a little bit more insights, and we're here to support you. Yeah? Good. So I don't know, we're getting more professional. We're just in time of an hour. And I really thank you, Michael, for your time and willingness to join us and give your insights on the EUDR. We strongly believe that the practical approach is the key element, that in theory, reading legislation is not what all of us love to do, but we want to achieve the goal, which is get compliant, implement UDR at the simplest, easiest way, affordable, automated, and just keep our business, going and taking care of being compliant. So we know in the based on our experience and implementations, not difficult, So just join us in getting compliant and make your life easier. Yeah. So once again, many thanks, Michael. Many thanks for all of you who found your time and interest in joining us. Have a good day. Take care. All the best.